Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second town hall. This is Dan Mantz, CEO of the REC Foundation. For those of you that tuned in today to see Grant Cox, don't worry, he will be showing up a little bit later, but you'll start the webinar with me today. So very excited to be here. We have a lot of great news for you, a lot of new programs, and of course, our big announcement will come a little bit into this, where we're going to be announcing our live remote head-to-head competition. So, but we have some other stuff to start off with. First of all, I want to thank Innovation First International, the parent company of VEX in Greenville, Texas, for again allowing us to use their studio. So as I walked in today, IFI gave me this fantastic mask. So we still are in the middle of a pandemic, and we still encourage everybody to wear their masks and to do proper social distancing. Here in the studio today, we are 6 feet apart, so we're taking all the precautions and encourage you to do so. I'd also like to give a recognize of our students and our teachers and our event partners in California, Oregon, and Alabama. We know that you've been impacted by the recent natural disasters of the forest fires and the Hurricane Sally. So we're with you, our thoughts are with you, and we hope that you'll recover soon. Also want to give a shout out to everybody in our organization, everybody that was part of this organization, part of our programs that have been impacted by COVID-19. We know it's been a really challenging time. This came upon us in a typhoon like in February, and we're all still reacting and learning. So our hearts are with you that have been directly or indirectly impacted. I'd also like to give a shout out to my mentor. So I know as the CEO, people don't think I have mentors, but I have a mentor too, and he's been battling some illness recently. But I want to give a big shout out to Terry Marbett. He's the REC Foundation Regional Support Manager for Georgia and South Carolina, and he's watching tonight. We're really glad you're with us, Terry. So thanks for all you've done for me. You've been a big inspiration. And finally, my staff. It's been a challenging time, hasn't it? But we've really done some amazing things. We've used this as an opportunity to take a step back, look at what we want to be, release new programs, release new documentation, and get your input. So I'm very proud of how we've persevered through this whole entire pandemic. So thank you for the belief in what we do. Thank you for your patience, and we are going to come out of this stronger than ever. And finally, a big thank you to VEX Robotics, that provides some of the products for some of our most well-known and best programs, the ones that many of them we're going to feature today. And thanks to Bob Linlich and Tony Norman. Through the entire pandemic, they've been there to support the REC Foundation, let us use their spaces, giving us access to their staffs and the resources so that we continue to support programs. So with that, I'm going to get started. So I'd like to start by recapping kind of what we've been doing the last 6 months. So remember, we had the first town hall in June, and I think we made probably our most important announcement of the year, and that is indeed we are going to have a season. So we made that announcement. Now, we were kind of honest with you and said we're not exactly sure what it's going to look like, but please tune in July at our event partner summit where we'd have more information. So in July, we shared our restart guide, and we highlighted that yes, indeed, the REC Foundation was going to bring back skills-only events. We knew that skills-only events were a great way to practice social distancing and still allow students to experience the entire program. They'd still get to build their robot, they'd still get to iterate the design, and they get to compete. But we also announced then that we were going to have remote skills, where teams in their own field could build a robot and film their skills and submit it, and that would be counted. But we knew that wasn't enough. And so that's what we're here today, is to announce many of our own programs. So one quick review is in September 3rd, we did update our season restart guide. And our restart guide now includes much more information on how to run events, how to run these skill events that we've talked about. So that was a big release for us. We also gave a lot more guidelines to the event partners on how to host events, especially a specific guideline on hosting remote skills events. So those have been some great resources, and I hope that if you haven't seen them yet, you go to our website and look at the COVID-19 page, find all the resources there that can help you. Right now, we have just released a new document called the Coach's Guide. So a lot of impact, a lot of feedback from our staff is that these resources we've released have been geared more to our event partners, but we know that the teachers, educators, coaches out there also wanted some guidelines. So two people in our organization, Andy and Leslie, took the lead on this, and also have completed a coach's guide that is going to be available this week. Another document that was just uploaded yesterday, I believe, or maybe a couple days ago, is our Q&A. This, if you have not seen it, the Restart Q&A answers all the questions that you've been asking. I read it again today. It's got a lot of information. So of course, the Restart Guide version 2 has got all the details, but if you want a quick summary of what you're looking for, I highly recommend that you read the Q&A. And as we announced back in June and talked about again in July, big thanks to Steve, our regional support manager, senior regional support manager out of California, who's been taking the lead on this stuff. You know, one of the things about this season is our skills events. And we took a big leap out there bringing these back, because in the past, we've always had some obstacles with those. But again, as I said earlier, we really believe that these skills events are a great way for your students to have a season. And, you know, I want to emphasize that you can have them as a regular skills event where teams come to your facility, and with practice and social distance, they can be there and run a skills scores, you know, their driving skills and their autonomous skills. And of course, the remote skills where you block off some time and you still run, but you upload and videotape it, right? We also are allowing judging at the skills events too. So the same thing, you can have live judging or you can have remote judging. And the nice thing about the remote judging, which again is discussed in the season restart guide, is you can do the judging ahead of time. So this should really help event partners and really help the coaches balance the time. So you could get your judging all done on Wednesday before your Saturday event, for example. We thought that having all these events would really encourage more events this year. So we've been trying to figure out, well, you know, we have a lot of teams registering. We thought we might have more by this point. So we've been reaching out to some of the teams that haven't registered, and they said, hey, we still want to have a season, but there's no events posted in our area. So I ran the numbers today with our staff, and we actually have about 520 events posted now. And you may say, that's a lot, but what do you normally? Dan, what does the REC Foundation normally have posted at this point? And we're usually closer to 2,000. We generally do about 3,000 events a year, and at this point, we're usually at about 2,000 events posted. So what we really need our event partners to do is to look at having a live, you know, in-person event if your area allows you to. If not, to really look at these skills events. And we know that once you start posting more events, more teams will register, and that will make sure that this program keeps going. Well, you still said, okay, Dan, you've published what a skills event is. You've given us some guidelines, but it really still doesn't make sense to me. So Andy from our Greenville, Texas office has taken the lead, and he is actually going to run both a live skills in-person event and a remote skills event on Saturday, I think it's what, the 24th or 25th. That's 2 Saturdays from now. And so that event has been posted. So the in-person event, like our normal qualification for this year, 75% of the teams need to be from Texas. And let's face it, with traveling, probably it will be mostly populated with North Texas teams, but we're gonna run that. And in our building, in the REC Foundation building here in Texas, we've got 3 doors. So you're gonna come in one door, you're going to do your inspection, we're gonna have temperature checks, then you'll proceed to the next queuing area, socially distance, and then finally to run your skills events. And meanwhile, while you're running your skills events, the next team will be, you know, retrieved from the parking lot, and they'll come in and they'll do their temperature checks and their inspections. And we're gonna document this entire process. In parallel, Andy and the team, and it's the entire team of the REC Foundation that's helping out, Andy and this team will actually be running the remote event also. And we're going to do judging also. We're actually going to do judging. And we'll be filming all this so that we can provide a guideline. We're also offering all event partners out there that want to watch it live, we're going to send you a link so that you can watch it. And we do have it open for the first 16 teams to register. And because it is a remote event, it doesn't have to be all North Texas. So we're expecting to see some teams from different regions register. And I think this is going to really show you guys, provide a template of what we can accomplish this season. So I encourage you EPs to both watch this event and to register. We did the math. You know, if you have only 16 teams and you charge a registration fee of $25 and say they pay by credit card, so that's the $5, you get still 20 by 16, right? You still get some registration fees to help offset your costs and for your terrace. So we really, really encourage you. We think this is going to be a great, great asset to the season. Okay, that's a lot to say. I'm sure already we're getting lots of questions about what just I announced, and that's just the beginning. So the next resource that I would like to announce today is what I'm calling our remote coaching for teams. And really what this is, it's a resource for those areas that the coaches, you know, haven't been back to school as a teacher because the school's locked out, or maybe our coaches that aren't teachers haven't been able to meet with their teams because of areas, you know, the requirements of their areas and their schools and stuff like that. But our students are telling us they want to have a season. The students still want to do what's so wonderful about our program, which is build robots, design robots, and socialize with their friends. They want the social aspect too. And so many of you coaches out there may be saying, how do I do this? So what we're proposing, or we're going to actually been beta testing in California already, is that with the help of some event partners and some coaches, we will actually provide and facilitate these remote coaching sessions. And so it will be for coaches, but the idea is to share the resources that we've developed and resources that other teams are doing so that you yourself can make the decision to go out and coach teams this year. So we'll have a lot more information on this posted on October 1st. But I wanted to make you aware that that's coming out there. And again, a big thank you to Steve in California and to some of our great event partners that are actually beta testing for us. And what we're really seeing is what we just saw. So the first week we had this remote coaching session, about 30 coaches participated. By the third week, we had 60 coaches participating. We started by week 1 answering some questions, how to have a season. Week 2, we talked about the game. We talked about building robots, and in the future weeks we're going to talk about the engineering design process in the notebook, and all those materials are being captured so that we can use these too. But again, this is a resource. This isn't something that's going to necessarily happen in your region, but if you are interested, please reach out to your regional support manager. Our second big announcement today is our RAD program. So last year we announced our pilot program of the Remote Aerial Drones Competition. And that was a physical competition with our partner For the Win out of Atlanta, Georgia. And we did a great job of having a pilot season. Excuse me, RAD is not, or FTW is now in LA. They're not in Georgia anymore. But anyway, we had a great season. We actually had almost 370 registered teams. We were easily going to hit our max of 500 when COVID hit. But we learned a lot from that. And just today, the RAD program released their restart guide, and it's available on the RAD website on roboticseducation.org. So we released that restart guide, and also the game manual will be coming soon. And the game this year has a Mars theme, and I believe it's called, I wrote it down so I wouldn't mess it up. It's called Downdraft. Yep. So all those that are listening that do our great VEX Robotics programs, many of you are doing drones too. But that season will continue, and we'll have a 1v0 option. So it's one student against the drones field. So that will be fantastic for areas that are socially distancing. And we're also very, very excited to announce today a new partner, Robotify. And together we have worked with them to create a virtual drones competition. So our virtual drones competition will be a multiplayer competition. It's browser-based, so it's accessible from any device. It's going to open on October 1st. So we'll have both the game manual and the registration open on October 1st, and the registration fee will be $100 per team. So this is a great way for students to experience all the excitement that drones have to offer, and also for those teams that want to do both virtual drone and drone competition. They want to do both programs. We are offering a $25 discount. So $150 for the RAD competition and $100 for virtual RAD, or you can get both for $225. And so we're super excited about that announcement today. You guys are going to really like how this looks. If you go to the RAD webpage on roboticseducation.org, you'll see some pre-teaser information about the game and the graphics. So big thanks to our partners, FTW for the win, and to Robotify for that. Okay, so after we had VEX Worlds and we went to the virtual celebration is what we called it. We had so many. I'd say the #1 question I was asked, besides are you going to have a season, the next question I was asked, what about those teams that qualified for VEX Worlds in Louisville in 2020 that didn't get to compete? You know, they should get invited to 2021. Well, practically that wasn't possible, right? Even though we have a little bit more space in Dallas and we are going to increase the number of teams that are able to compete in Dallas, it just wasn't feasible for us to invite every team that had qualified in 2020 and still be able to have, you know, all the new teams out there compete and qualify for Worlds. But that really weighed on us. We really wanted a way to recognize these teams that had qualified for Worlds. So the programs team, and especially led by Lisa out of Washington, we came up with an online challenge called Encore. And basically, this Encore online challenge will recognize teams that qualified for Worlds last year and give them an opportunity to qualify for Worlds in 2021. There'll be 50 qualifiers per division, so 50 IQ elementary, 50 IQ middle, 50 VRC middle, 50 VRC high school. Basically what you'll do is, first of all, you have to have at least one student on your team that was on the team that qualified the year before. So that's the first, and we would like to see teams have a lot of the same students, but we know that teams leave schools or they move up programs and stuff like that. So you have to have at least one. You also must play in events. So whether you play in a remote event or an in-person event, you do need to compete this year. And you also need to compete successfully. Your skills score must be in the top 50%. So we do want to encourage students to actually build competitive robots as a way to get there. The other, what I think is really neat thing, you said 50 slots. Well, Dan, by my math, there were 2,400 teams that qualified for Worlds last year. And by my math, that's only 200 of the 2,400. Well, once many of these top teams qualify for Worlds again, they're off the list, and that opens up that spot. And then finally, the aspect of this is an online challenge. So you will need to fill out some forms and provide some information, but we're also having you put a video together. And I'm not going to tell you what the video requirements are, because tonight by 9 o'clock, this online challenge will be posted and you can get all the information. For all those out there that were clamoring, we qualified last year. We think we deserve a spot next year. We've provided you another path to qualify for VEX Worlds in Dallas in 2021. Okay, I have a lot of stuff to say, so I'm going to take a breath. So, by the way, I have to say, somebody dropped off these Reese's pumpkins for me. So anybody that knows me knows that I love those Reese's Easter eggs. I mean, they're really tasty, right? So Easter's fun because obviously all the religious reasons and your faith-based observations, but I also just love the Easter candy. And someone saw these today and said, Dan, these are a lot like Easter eggs. So maybe when Grant's on camera, I'm gonna eat one. So if you see me rubbing my chin, you know what it is. So thank you. One of the things I also want to continue to tell the community about is the online learning resources. We have the slide for that, I think. But our online learning resources that are primarily a lot of VEX-based online resources were absolutely what this community needed during COVID-19. So I know Grant is going to be on camera soon and he may go into more details, but the VEX Code VR has been used by 50,000 or 500,000. It's an incredible amount of numbers, but the other resources out there, the knowledge base, the STEM labs, are absolutely fantastic. And what's amazing is that VEX continues to populate that page, their resources. So I highly encourage all you students, all you teachers to continue to go to that. There are other resources out there. We provide some links to STEM education videos, to Carnegie Mellon resources, etc. So there are other resources there too. But a big thank you to VEX and to other organizations for providing these great resources for our students so that they continue to engage in STEM. And with that, I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and I would be proud and very fortunate to introduce my really good friend, Grant Cox, and he's going to give you an update on what VEX has been doing over the last few months. Grant?
Thank you so much, Dan. How's everybody doing out there? So great to be here for another one of these, webinars, one of these town halls with the REC Foundation. Love hearing about all the things that the REC has been doing. VEX has also been hard at work trying to make sure that, the resources that are available out there for teaching VEX in the classroom are as up to date as possible for teachers trying to bridge, or make their way through this difficult year. So we have a couple different things that we've been rolling out. Our education team down in Pittsburgh has been doing an absolutely phenomenal job of rolling out a ton of new content over the past few months. So I'm not sure if we have the slide up for them, but basically you can get all of the information about our new COVID resources at covid.vex.com. So at covid.vex.com, it basically takes you directly to a landing page that lists all of the, again, new resources, new learning resources that we have out there. One of the #1 questions that we got asked about was disinfecting your VEX products, right? How does that work? What is safe? What isn't safe? What works best? What doesn't damage the components? So we were able to put together a guide for that. Long story short, it's essentially Lysol wipes. Lysol wipes are pretty much fine for VEX electronics and VEX metal and everything. So we did that. We also have a number of new hybrid teaching guides out there for educators. Our Director of Educational Strategy, Jason McKenna, did a phenomenal webinar. If you just Google, or if you search on YouTube, VEX COVID, it's the first result. And a lot of good information there about how educators in these hybrid environments can still teach robotics and still get those lessons across. And then, of course, as Dan mentioned, VEX Code VR is just an absolutely phenomenal piece of software. If you have not had the chance to try it out, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Go to code.vex.com. And I was looking up, as you were talking about the user numbers, we had some interesting stats come through. Last Thursday was the single highest usage day of VEX Code VR. We had over 18,000 unique users in one day, over 9,000 hours of coding in one day, which my phone is telling me is more than a year of coding all done in one day. So loving the adoption rate of that. VEX Code VR has been updated with all sorts of new activities, new lesson plans. We even unveiled or announced rather, our CS curriculum, fundamentals computer science curriculum that will be based around VEX Code VR as well. So tons of stuff out there if you're trying to find a way to teach robotics in your classroom. I believe that's all I had for that particular note. I will be back. Do I have any Q&A at this point, or is this?
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet, so.
All right. So yeah, that basically covers it. Again, you can summarize everything I just said by go to covid.vex.com if you're an educator looking for more information. So thank you so much, Dan.
Very good. All right, so Grant will be back shortly, as he said. But right now, I am very, very pleased to announce our newest competition, the live remote head-to-head competition. So again, we talked about the history back in June and July, and we knew that as great as skills are, we knew that many areas are going to still have their in-person competitions, but we knew students out there love to compete. They learn so much from the competition process, right? They iterate their robots, but they also learn by watching what other people are doing. They make their friendships, the soft skills. So many questions I've been asked is, what about the soft skills? What's COVID-19 doing? So we knew we needed to find a way to allow teams to compete against each other. But we knew that in many parts of the world, in many parts of the United States, that getting together in a face-to-face manner wasn't going to happen. So for months now, we've been brainstorming, working with VEX and figuring out what we can do. And guys, we found a solution. We found a way to have a real competition. That means not just a multiple skills challenge, but where strategy and communication are still essential, where it's 2v2, where we still have a red alliance versus a blue alliance in VRC, and we have two teams collaborating with each other in VEX IQ. And we're very excited to announce it today. So we have a video that Brad Lauer is going to show here in a minute, but I want to say that the concept is a little bit different because there's not some direct robot interfacing with each other. So we had to come up with some tweaks to the game, which Grant's going to discuss a little bit later. but it will be a strategy game. You will still use the same game elements that you had for this season, but you will still be able to use robots that will be able to play both games, which I think is really important, but you will still be able to communicate with your alliance partner, and you will be able to compete against another alliance. And that will lead to alliance selections and elimination rounds, etc. So with that little bit of teaser, I could talk forever about it and what went into this, but I think everything will be highlighted with the video that we're about to show you.
In preparation to support a full-scale implementation of live remote head-to-head competition this season, the REC Foundation launched a test version of its new remote competition technology to support practice matches. 3 schools were chosen to demo and test this new system: Greenville High School, Furlow Middle School, and Terrell High School. This proof of concept allowed 3 schools separated by as much as 40 miles to compete with and against each other for the first time. The REC Foundation will be integrating this new system with robotevents.com to support live remote head-to-head competitions for the VEX Robotics Competition and VEX IQ Challenge starting in early November. To get started, participants simply logged in at robotevents.com, selected their team from the drop-down menu, and were placed in the practice match lobby. The system then quickly guided them to set up their webcam, connect their V5 controller, select their program, and complete their field setup. After the system confirmed that they were ready, teams selected a practice match and then joined. After all teams joined and were ready, practice matches began.
Here we are at the first ever remote live match. Practice match number 1. It's 3, 2, 1, and go. In the upper right-hand corner for the Blue Alliance doing 360s, we actually had some movement for both of the 2148 teams from Greenville High School. Remember, these teams are separated by 45 miles right now in 3 different locations. And that is the end of Auton. At this point, every team is saying they are ready to go into driver control. We're waiting on one more team. And that is it. That starts our 3, 2, 1 countdown. The signal that just went out across all of East Texas and the world started all 4 robots at the exact same time. Distance was not an issue. And we just had 75-168 scoring a blue ball in the corner goal for a point, and it looks like they were able to seal an entire row there on the side of the 75-168 screen. In the meantime, on the Blue Alliance, so Terrell High School just fell over. We had a robot spill in the upper right-hand corner. We are down to 2v1 battle. So the only school left for Terrell High School is at the middle school location, and our driver is making the best of it. Their alliance partner, 75-160B, trying to pick up that red ball up against the wall, struggling to get it. They're going to move past. Let's move over to the Red Alliance. 2148A on the upper left-hand corner has 1 ball in their intake. Looks like they're trying to get that second red ball, moving it over to the corner goal, and their alliance partners were actually about 50 yards away in a room on the other side of the building, same building, different room, scoring a red ball in that corner goal. That's good for a point. Now, it's hard for me to see from this angle if they've scored an entire row. Looks like they're going for the center goal. They've got the robot is hovering over it. They weren't able to get the ball out. Maybe they need that backstop for it to be able to guarantee that the ball does bounce off and roll in. They're backing off that one. We are in driver control, 45 miles separated.
My name is Giovanni, and I am on VEX team 4148. Before, I had a lot of questions on, how is this all going to move? Are we going to get an experience like the VEX experience? But now, for sure, I know that we are. The competitive aspect of it is still there. I still know that I'm competing against another team. It's going to allow teams to do much better being in their home environment. It's going to allow them to program, have more time to prep, and give them better ideas.
Don't worry, VEX IQ teams. We will be using the same technology with 2 teams instead of 4 to provide a live remote practice system as well as a full live remote competition option, also coming in early November. And by the way, the same amazing experience from in-person VEX IQ and VRC matches will be available with our live remote system, including scheduling and scoring matches, having an announcer discuss your match live, remote inspection, and real-time rankings and match results. When the REC Foundation set out to make live remote competition accessible to all robotics enthusiasts in our programs, we wanted to keep the expense of participating to a minimum. Luckily, we were able to determine that almost any low-cost USB webcam with a minimum resolution of 720p would work, as long as it's on a 7-foot stand removed about 7 feet from the competition field to provide a complete view to all teams participating, as well as referees. This system works on most laptops and also requires a USB to micro USB cable, which we recommend to be at least 6 feet long. Stay tuned for game manual updates during the first week of October, as well as our initial release of live remote practice matches on robotevents.com. Then join us in early November as we release our beta version of live remote head-to-head competition for the VEX IQ Challenge and VEX Robotics Competition. Don't forget, get registered today and join us at in-person competitions and live remote head-to-head competitions.
Hey, I hope you guys are excited about that as I am. So this came together so quickly. And as you see, we're going to have a lot more information available on October 1st. But literally a week ago, we had our first little trial of the software. And this software has been developed by VEX, Innovation First International over here, doing an amazing job. And our team, led by Brad Lauer, has been doing a lot of support of this too. So it's been a huge development, right? But just literally a week ago, we saw the proof of concept with 4 different fields, 4 different cameras working. And then it evolved that we had 2 fields here at VEX Robotics and 2 fields at the REC Foundation, to what you just saw right now, which is we had 4 different fields set up at 4 different locations, the locations up to 45 miles apart from each other. So super exciting. A couple more weeks to work out the bugs before we start going into some demo and practice matches, and with the hopes of having the remote season kick off in November. But as you can imagine, even though there's some technical challenges, probably a bigger challenge is how do we play this game? And so we're fortunate to have Grant here to kind of walk us through the process. And I'm going to pop in when needed. But Grant, what so far has been the biggest challenges of trying to pull off this remote competition?
I wasn't sure how you were going to throw me, and that is the perfect question to frame this. Yeah, so the biggest challenge for developing the new rules for a remote competition. So the best way to answer that was when Dan and Brad and the technology team and the team at IFI, everybody started theorizing this idea of a live remote competition. I think every third word out of everybody's mouth was GDC. Like, everybody was concerned how the rules were going to adapt. How do you do head-to-head? Like, this year's game, especially for VRC, is a physical head-to-head game. There is, back and forth scoring and descoring. And it's like, we can stream 4 webcams to each other all day, but if there's no game that they're playing, then they're just running 4 skills matches at once. That's not fun. And so the biggest challenge, and what I kept telling everybody was, the GDC knows how to design games for a 12-foot by 12-foot field that has 2 alliances and has these types of constraints and whatnot. Trying to design a game for a live remote setting is like trying to design a game for a field that we don't know the field perimeter size, for a game that we don't know what the robots are and whatnot. So it was a really interesting, collaborative process. The tech team was working on all the development work in parallel to the GDC, trying to figure out what new challenges there are, how you can keep the game interesting. So I'm going to briefly go into some of the rules modifications that we're looking at. Everything I'm about to talk about, I guess I should preface it by saying we think we got it. It was it was more challenging than fixing VRC skills earlier this year, which at that point was the hardest thing we've ever had to do. But we think we're pretty close. And so much like the tech team was able to do a preview video of some of the tech behind it and how the technology is going to work, I have the preview of some of the gameplay changes. Nothing that I'm about to say is final. Nothing I'm about to say is committed. Please don't ask Q&As about this on the official Q&A, that is. You can ask about it during this webinar. But it's really important to me for people to start visualizing how this game could be played, how these games could be played. And then we'll of course be releasing the full details in full legalese, in full, detailed verbiage in that game manual update on October 1st. So for VEX IQ Challenge Rise Above, the way that the game is going to work is one team per field, 2 teams per alliance, same as existing gameplay. The field layout is going to be slightly different. On the standard field layout, you start with 9 risers of each color. In the remote version, it will be 6 risers of each color. So you won't have access to all of the risers. You can't build a theoretically maxed out field, right? Then at the end of the match will play as normal, 3, 2, 1, go, driver switch, yada, yada. At the end of the match, you can essentially visualize combining the 2 fields together. And this concept starts to get more complicated when I get to VRC. So just take the ride with me. But you can visualize it as kind of like laying the 2 fields on top of each other. So if a IQ team or team A has a riser in this goal and team B has 2 risers in these 2 goals, it's the same as one alliance having 3 risers in that row. So the 2 fields will be combined. That's how you do the risers and the row scoring. So in that example I just gave, team A has 1 riser here, team B has a riser here and here. That is a completed row. In order to do a completed stack, however, the completed stacks do not combine. Completed stack needs to be completed by one team on their own field. So conceivably, if you have team A has a riser here, and team B has 2 risers in that same goal, those do not add together. It's not a completed stack. So you can kind of see how that comes together. If it sounds a little awkward, I'm going to be making a forum post after this webinar with basically the same script that I'm reading off of. So everything, you'll be able to reference it there. So for VEX Robotics Competition Change Up, this was a cool challenge because this game was designed around head-to-head descoring and scoring and replacing things and teams chasing each other around the field. We knew we wanted a gameplay dynamic that still had basically, like Dan said earlier, a reason to watch the other webcams, right? A strategy that changes as the match goes on. A strategy that requires you to work with your alliance partner, both pre-match strategy and then during the match, communicating with them to react to your opponents. So the way it's going to work, at least as it stands right now, same starting field layout, same game elements, same starting locations, and what have you. All scoring is cumulative between the 2 teams on the same alliance. So much like I just explained with IQ, you can think of it as combining into like a red alliance field and a blue alliance field. The 2 alliance fields don't combine, they compare against each other. So you only have to think of a red alliance field and a blue alliance field. Autonomous period, autonomous win point are all pretty much the same. But the big changes come into where you start looking at how the balls are scored and how you determine ownership. So there are some point changes, and again, this will all be in the forum posts. Balls of your alliance color are worth 2 points when scored in a goal. Balls of the opposing alliance's color are worth 1 point when scored in a goal. So you actually will get points for opposing alliance color balls. Point value of connected rows changes to 9. It gets more important. And then to determine ownership, you compare a given goal from the red alliance field to the blue alliance field, and whichever alliance has more points in that goal is going to be the owner of that goal. In the standard gameplay, ownership is decided by whoever is on top of the goal. In this type of remote setting, you can't really do top or bottom. There's no way a ref could track, who placed it in first. So the cumulative score of a given goal, I'm thinking, yeah, you can see. So let's say, in this particular goal, red alliance gets 10 points out of that particular goal. Blue alliance gets 8 points out of that particular goal. That is considered a red-owned goal. So you'll be wanting to watch, how your opponents are stacking their balls, how they're, connecting their rows, and try to combat them. But that wasn't enough, because even with that, you still kind of do run into some lock scenarios where you could basically, you know, guarantee a tie or a stalemate or what have you. So we added an end game. One of the things that this game did not have originally was an end game. We didn't slap a hanging bar on it, because in these types of back and forth games, the end game is that last second, you know, score, that last second swap, right? Without physical head-to-head gameplay, that isn't there. So the end game is going to be, if a robot is contacting a goal at the end of the match, then all balls in that goal for both teams on that alliance are worth double points. So this applies to both raw point values and for determining ownership. So basically, if you're red and you see that blue has completely blown out this one connected row or what have you, but you know that doubling your center will actually overcome them without having to descore or rescore, you can try and run for that at the end of the match. And if you're blue, you'll probably see that run happening and you'll probably try to run for it as well, or try to move things around or what have you. It takes a minute to wrap your head around. Like I said, I'm going to be posting it so you can review it all. And there will be tons of benefit of the doubt and intent of the game, you know, blue boxes or red boxes on this rule as well. I promise refs won't have to do paper tests over webcams. But basically, that's the idea. It takes the core dynamic of what we wanted to see out of change up, which was that back and forth strategy, that reacting to what your opponents do, visiting different goals multiple times because you have to change what you did, change up what you did. We're pretty excited. I personally think it's a pretty cool change. I think it's a lot of fun. Oh, and one more thing, no possession limits, because who needs possession limits in a remote game? So I think those are all the major changes. There are more things still being discussed. This is not a comprehensive list of the changes. These are not final, subject to change. How many more disclaimers can I put on it? But I wanted you all to start talking about it, start thinking about it, start visualizing it. So yeah, I'm excited. What do you think?
So Grant, I like the term core dynamic. You know, one of the things I know that you really wanted to make sure that you worked on is that teams wouldn't have to have a different robot for both the in-person game and the remote game. So what was the thought process behind that?
As far as how did we accomplish that, or as far as, so we were trying to figure out how you could get a remote game to feel similar to the existing game, right? And one metric that one member of the GDC came up with was a team who is good at the remote version should probably also be good at the in-person version, right? And vice versa. We don't want it to be a totally different game, but with these slight tweaks and these slight changes, I do think that some people are going to gravitate to the new strategic elements of this, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. It was important that those students have gone through the design process and really figured out how to play the original game as released.
Right.
That they were still rewarded for that, and that their robots could play both and be rewarded for that. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic that the GDC brought to this new remote model.
I hope. It's been a fun process, and I'm really excited to see what people think, and I'm excited to see how it plays. So yeah, that's
yeah. So to the audience out there, we actually have a special guest, and then we know. So Brad and the producers are telling us that there's so many questions coming in and a lot of very positive comments, which makes me happy. But before we get to questions, and Grant will be back, I am very, very happy to introduce Adrienne Emerson. She is the STEM director for Greenville ISD. She's a longtime friend of mine too, so I'm super excited to have her here. And I also want to show, so if you haven't figured out from the video, Adrienne and two of her Greenville ISD robotics programs were part of the beta that we did earlier this week. I also want to give a shout out to Marcus from Terrell ISD. He's the CTE specialist, STEAM specialist for engineering and robotics. So the other two teams were in Terrell. So because of COVID and social distancing, we weren't going to ask him to come up here today. But a big thank you for opening up his school to our video crew and all our tech people and stuff like that to participate this. So, so Adrian, first question for you is, did your students enjoy participating in this, and what was their overall experience?
Thanks so much for having me, Dan. My students had such a great time participating in this. They were really excited not only to be part of the first ever virtual match in robotics competition, but it was really cool for them to be able to experience competition inside their classroom. And a lot of them didn't even think that was going to be possible this year. So to be able to do that for them was just so exciting, and they had such a great time with it. That's
fantastic. It's great to hear. Can you see how this competition will evolve for like rural and urban teams? You know, do you think that this is going to change the dynamic of how rural and urban teams participate in robotics?
Yeah, you know, we're from a relatively rural district here in Greenville, and so even our local competitions can sometimes be hours away. You know, just getting to Dallas-Fort Worth, the Metroplex, where a lot of the competitions in our area are, it takes us over an hour to get there. So for rural teams that even have it, you know, worse than we do, this is going to change the game for us. We're going to be able to have competitions. We're not going to have to travel long distances, and we're going to be able to, you know, interact with teams from all over the world potentially, and be able to, you know, just have a VEX competition with them right in our hometown. So.
Yeah, that's kind of in the REC Foundation. That's what we've been talking about too, is this really changes dynamics. So we always talk about underserved areas, right? And the first thing that popped to us is, man, all these rural teams that are, you know, 30, 40, 2 hours away from a competition can now start competing. Not instead of just once or twice a year, they can really be overall. And this also allows, you know, areas in urban areas that have a trouble getting out of their school now to compete too. So we're super, super excited. We think this has an impact on the season, but we actually think it has an impact on how we do competitive robotics going forward too. So based on what you have seen, do you think this is going to allow your team to practice? I mean, Greenville ISD has, you know, one of the top FRC programs in the world, but they also have at any given year 70 or 80 VEX teams too. So obviously with COVID, you guys have had your hands strung a little bit. Is this going to allow you guys to practice and compete?
Yeah, we're so excited because in our program, we do have a lot of teams, and we're spread out over our entire district, multiple campuses. And getting together just in those groups was going to be really difficult for us. But we're really fortunate we have VEX fields set up at our high school and at our middle school. And now, instead of trying to figure out how we can safely bring those groups of kids together, we can have them each in their own spaces, but still practicing against each other and strategically talking to each other and figuring out how to best play the game, and still having all those great interactions. But we get to stay you know, on our separate campuses, and you know, we can even do that with other schools that are in our area or teams that we know from across the country. And so we'll be able to practice in a much more meaningful way, rather than just doing a team or, you know, scrimmage within our team or something like that.
Yeah, I find that response really interesting, because one of the things we always talk about our program is it's more than just the robot, it's the soft skills. And you've just shown now that you can do that troubleshooting and that communication and still develop those skills that are so important. So that's a really good answer to hear that. That's knowing that we made a good decision here. So one of the things that amazed me as you guys watched that video is, you know, on the VRC side, is all those robots started at the same time. They still did their autonomous mode, and then they all got to say go, right? And then the regular drive match portion started too. So, you know, that was done remotely, right? These were 4 different schools, 4 different hookups. So you seeing this for the very first time on Monday, what was your overall impression of that system?
It was, I couldn't believe how fast it was set up. First of all, you know, it showed in the video, but most of our field, you know, we already have our fields set up in our school for this year. And so we were able to just put a camera on it, hook it up to a laptop, and start running our matches. It took almost no time at all. And those are resources that we have, and I know that a lot of teams out there have, and so it was really easy for us to just get going right away and be able to run matches and just, you know, kind of get going. And we did it right after school. And so we were able to run matches basically from the time we got out of school in just a few minutes. So.
Okay. You know, some people may be skeptical and say, well, Greenville ISD is, you know, has a full-time person running the robotics. You're also a teacher. Everybody knows she's an incredible STEM teacher also, but you know, they're like, okay, here in these different areas, we don't have the resources that maybe Greenville ISD is. So do you think these new remote competitions will allow students to be involved anywhere? Or do you think this is something that you still got to have, you know, all these great resources that GISD does?
Really, for us, all it took was a field, our robots, a camera, and a laptop. And I think, especially now in this COVID era, a lot of us have access to laptops and cameras. And so just being able to add the VEX elements to that, the field elements and our robot, you know, that was really all we needed. And I was surprised how well it went together and how quickly it went together, and we really didn't need much of anything else. So
fantastic. One more question. Actually, I got two more. But first of all, do you think the event partners out there are the backbone of the REC Foundation? I think I'm EP fan #1, right? So how do you think this new technology can help us increase the number of event partners?
I think the barrier for entry for event partners is way lower than it has been in the past. You know, before you need multiple fields, lots of technology and different equipment, lots of volunteers. But now it really only takes a couple people to set up the system right in your own backyard. And then you just have to have all the teams come in and connect to it. And then you're running matches right off the bat. So I think it's so easy. I think a lot of people who felt like events were out of their reach can really easily set up the system and be running events in no time.
Sign me up. I'm ready. So one last question, Adrienne. So in your illustrious coaching career, you've got world championships in VEX and in FIRST and lots of banners and stuff. I've heard you worked with a lot of good other coaches and mentors. So who's your all-time favorite coach that you've worked with?
Wow, Dan really put me on the spot there. Well, of course, I've always enjoyed working with you, Dan. Which is good, but I'm gonna throw a big shout out to my mentors from my very first FRC team that I ever joined, Team 191, the X-Cats. All my Xerox mentors that worked there were amazing. I was just on a Zoom call with them today, and they made me into the person I am today. So
very good. Thank you so much for doing this for us. We really appreciate your support, not just for this new event, but for everything that you've done over the last decade. So thanks again. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of Q&As, a lot of questions on this, and so right now we're going to open this up to specific questions from the remote competition, right? So, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about how this impacts VEX Worlds, but lots and lots of questions out there. So the first one to me is, how can we do live remote events if we don't own a field or game elements? Yes, this is where our event partner network is so important, right? So over the last couple of years, we've given out over $300,000 in trailer grants. So we're going to ask our event partners to support us by getting trailers to these locations. I think that's really important. Yes, you still need game elements. That's something that you'll still have to purchase to participate. But again, we are looking to partner with our event partners to host these events and to support this organization, support what we've been doing. Oh, and Grant said it's okay for me to talk about the do-it-yourself field. So I thought maybe he'd want to talk about it when he came back on camera. But indeed, you know, you will need to use the VEX game elements. But without going into a lot of details, we do have a do-it-yourself field. So that'll allow you to go to your local hardware store and buy the materials that you need to have a field in your own facility. Now, please understand that this is just for the remote competition. This won't be a sanctioned field for an in-person event, but again, for those people all over the US, all over the world, you can build your own do-it-yourself field for around $100. You do need to have the tiles, though. You do need to have the mats. Clearly with V5, we've improved the mats with the V5, and so you will need the field tiles and you'll also need to get the game elements. But still, you don't have to have the official in-person field. And I'm sure we'll answer a lot of questions about that in the future. So Brad, why don't you take a question?
Thanks, Dan. Well, the first question that I saw come in here was, how far can 2 teams or 4 teams be apart in order to compete using our live remote head-to-head competition system? And the answer is there's not a maximum distance between them. You know, obviously, as the system becomes more popular, more users get involved, we're going to have lobbies for, you know, different geographic areas. But you're always going to be able to play with and against teams near and far using our remote competition model.
Fantastic. So a question that came in that I'll try to answer is, what is the cost to attend a remote competition? So I'm actually going to answer this in 2 parts. So part number 1 is, if you have registered or you're planning to register for the REC Foundation season, VEX competition seasons, your registration fee is $150 for the first team, $100 for other teams in the United States. Of course, registration fees vary from country to country. And you will be able to compete in the remote competitions without any additional registration fees. As long as you're a registered team, you'll be able to participate in basically all 3 competitions. So our in-person event that we announced at VEX Worlds in April, our new skills events, as well as this live remote head-to-head competition. So your registration fee gets all of it. As far as your events, that will still be up to the event partner, right? The thing about our model is our event partner determines the pricing based on where they're locating and their costs in that area. So that will still be determined by the event partner, which has a lot of factors. And so we do not plan on having special built-in fees. There is a bit of a technology fee. You can imagine there's a lot of data being transferred to run this competition. So the REC Foundation does have increased storage costs and communications costs and stuff like that. So the fee to the REC Foundation, there will be an increase over the normal $5 to cover some of those extra costs. But we think you agree that it's well worth it to give the students an opportunity to compete this year.
But Dan, did we hear you right? There's no additional registration fee to compete in remote competitions?
No additional registration fee. Hey, you know, we're sincere when we tell you we want you to be able to compete. We want you coaches out there to give this experience to your students. Students, we want you to be able to design and build a robot. Event partners, we want you to continue to support the community. So that $150/$100 gets you all the REC Foundation competitions. All right, Brad, why don't you take another question?
Well, one of the questions we have is, how will this new system work for VEX U? As you can guess, we're planning on rolling the system out for VEX U shortly after our beta launch in early November. But it's going to work the exact same way. You know, we anticipate that a VEX U team will be able to have their 2 robots. They'll be able to plug into the field. We'll be able to remotely enable them, remotely disable them, and have them compete, you know, against other robots. So we anticipate this working in a very similar fashion. But let me also say that, you know, this is kind of brave new world for the REC Foundation, for VEX Robotics, and for everybody working on this. So I'm sure some of the things that we're working on now will take a little longer than we promised, and some of them will be ready a little bit earlier. But the one thing that we remain committed to, regardless, is making sure that all the teams in all of our programs have an opportunity to compete this year.
Great. Another question that came in is, when will the live remote competitions being able to register for, and how will we register for these events? Brad, you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, what was that one?
So when will the live remote competitions be available to register for, and how will we register for these events?
Okay, yeah, that second part. How will you register for the event? That one's easy. That is robotevents.com. You'll register for an event just the same way that you register for an in-person event right now. You know, the great news is that we've integrated this, you know, live remote head-to-head system
with robot events so that it's easy for everybody to compete with and against one another. The other piece, the when's it going to be ready? I think that is the $1 million question, Dan, and all the audience. But we're planning on rolling out our beta testing of this, as you guys saw, in early November, which means we plan on hosting the first events in early November. I also want to point out that we have committed in early October to letting all teams start accessing the practice system so that you're able to start, you're able to start using it. And so that by the time we get to, the time to do these remote competitions in November, you guys are accustomed to and you guys are ready to compete. Hopefully that helps, Dan.
Yeah, it does. And one of the questions that we've been asked already a lot today is the competition structure for live remote head-to-head. And our hope is that as the global pandemic, we continue to get better news and we get vaccines and stuff, that many of our teams will be able to go to in-person competitions. But there's some regions that will still just be able to compete remotely. So to qualify, we anticipate the exact same structure that we've always had. We'll have tournaments. They can be anywhere from 16 to larger tournaments. We want to start with smaller tournaments. Honestly, we want to prove our technology and make sure that we can handle all the questions you have. But, so when we get this started in late October, November 1st, there'll probably be 16 2014 tournaments. But we will have the remote judging that we've already offered. Teams will still play their normal qualifying matches. There'll be an alliance selection, and then there will be elimination rounds, true. So that part won't change. So people want to know, Brad, though, is will this lead to a VEX Worlds remote division?
Man, that's a great question, Dan. And before I answer it, I definitely want to answer a couple of questions that I've seen coming in related to VEX Worlds and related to the video. The first thing is that great video that you saw a few minutes ago that outlined what this new remote competition model looks like. It's available on our YouTube channel right now. Please finish listening to us here in this next 20 minutes or so, but it is being made available immediately so that you guys can see it. Obviously, we want to answer all the VEX Worlds questions that come in. Many of you know that the biggest question we've been getting lately is, will there be a VEX Worlds in Dallas in April 2021? And there will be. We're following the state, federal, and local guidelines to make sure that we provide a safe and high quality competition experience for all of our competitors. To answer the question directly, not only have we expanded our plans for the in-person event, but we're also planning to add VEX Worlds divisions that are live remote head-to-head competition for this year. It's our hope that for each of the 4 different main programs that we'll be having a couple of live remote head-to-head divisions for each one of them. So if you're a VRC middle school, a VRC high school, a VEX IQ elementary, a VEX IQ middle school, or a VEX U team, expect that there's going to be remote live head-to-head competition at VEX World that you can participate in, even if you're not able to travel to it yourself, even if you're not able to qualify for it in person. We're going to find a way that, as Dan mentioned, through our normal qualification structure, to give you guys an opportunity to do what you love, which is compete.
Wow, guys, everybody, you've heard it here first. So number 1, VEX Worlds is still on. We still expect to see people in Dallas in April of 2021. We announced earlier that we were adding a lot more divisions this year, and we'll play that by ear, right? We're realists here at the REC Foundation. It's very possible that with teams not being able to travel and different restrictions, and even maybe social distancing at the time in Dallas, that we'll have to make some changes. But right now, as of today, we still plan to have VEX Worlds in Dallas in April. But for all those that aren't able to travel to the United States, or teams within the US that can't travel to Dallas, we are providing an alternate path, and that will be this live remote head-to-head competition. We will have a couple divisions at the minimum for each of the programs out there. So if I were you, I'd like get really excited and go register your team, right? So this is super exciting. Man, there's just so many questions coming in, Grant. And so We're going to start answering some of the questions that you guys have for us. Actually, as I pause dramatically as they get posted for us. So first question, will teams that qualified for 2020 VEX Worlds be invited to the 2021 VEX Worlds? So I think we had actually talked about that earlier today. Our new online challenge, I highly encourage everybody to go to the REC Foundation website, so roboticseducation.org, go to our online challenges page, and you guys will see the new Encore online challenge. And that will allow 50 teams per program that qualified last year to qualify again this year. And of course, the skills winners, the teams that had a STEM Hall of Famer inducted, the previous online challenge winners, all of them that we invited back, that we announced back in June, will also be invited back. So there is a even more path for teams that qualified previously to qualify again this year. Grant, actually the next question's for me too. Wow, I guess they're getting all the hard ones out of the way so they can give you some softballs. I don't know. So is the October 1st deadline for posting events going to be the same this year? Actually, we already changed it. When we did our qualifying criteria document, a lot of our RSMs, the RSMs out there, guys, we have 20 of them at the REC Foundation for the US and 6 more for international. They said, Dan, let's be realistic. With schools just starting, that October 1st deadline isn't real. So we'd already moved it back to November 1st. And as the name of the game this year is flexibility, right? So we will be very adaptable to accommodate as many events as possible. So right now it's technically November 1st, but we do intend to be flexible. What about teams who qualified last year with IQ Middle that have now advanced to VRC High School? Do they qualify for the Encore competition? Again, the rule is if you had one student on the team, you can qualify for the new program that you're in. So again, go to the roboticseducation.org website to learn more about that program. If I'm an AP interested in watching the live remote skills challenge but do not have teams, can I get still access to the link? I'm in California and planning to host a remote competition this year. Yes, for the event that we're going to have 2 Saturdays from now, we will be sharing links for people to watch and to hopefully encourage you to learn about how to do both in-person and remote skills events. So you will be getting more information about that in the upcoming week. Grant, here's one for you. Will the 2021 game elements be reused for the 2021-2022 season?
No.
Grant, will it be a water game?
No. Not anymore.
I know.
No, so I'll give a slightly more satisfying answer than that. So the answer is still no, but no. This question has come up a couple times. Also, obviously, other FRC is redoing their game, and some other programs are talking about doing that. We do not intend to replay the game or reuse the elements, largely because we do our game design process over a 2-year period, as I've said a few times on these webinars, which means that the game elements for next year are already like in production. Like we would be then reusing elements year after year after year after year, and as well as the other reasons I usually give for why we don't reuse old game elements. Teams who have gone through the design process for 1 year's game, then they get like a leg up on the next year, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of things that we're still not sure about. There are a lot of questions you might ask that I'm going to say I don't know the answer to yet. That is one question I do know the answer to, and I can pretty firmly say we will not be replaying this game or reusing the elements next year.
Okay. Here's another one. Grant, in VEX IQ, due to the COVID restrictions, can one driver drive for the entire match?
Yes, that was part of the September game manual update. Yeah, whatever the most recent game manual update was. So we basically modified the SG rule or the G rule that talks through the driver switch, and basically added a contingency for if you choose to use only one driver, you basically ignore the rest of that rule that has to do with the driver switch. If you would like to use 2 drivers, you do have to use the existing driver switch rules. It's totally at the team's discretion. We're not going to be, we're not going to have head referees screening teams like, hey, you have a driver over there, why aren't you using them? totally at the team's discretion. And that is a rule change that is, at least for now, only in place for this season. Some of this stuff we're talking about doing for longer, that one is going to be reevaluated at the end of the season. But for this season, yes.
Here's another good one for you, Grant, and I don't know this one myself. Since many VEX U teams submit skill scores via volunteering at local events, how can VEX U teams submit their scores this season?
That is a good question. We talked about this. We ask that in the Q&A, the official Q&A. We have discussed this. I don't recall off the top of my head. Maybe somebody can pop in my phone and tell me the solution, but there will be a mechanism by which VEX U teams can submit scores, much like they have always been able to.
Okay, here's one for me. That's also a hard one, but
yeah, sorry about that.
I have a grant from last year, but cannot register for this year due to school guidelines. Will I need to return my kit and items? And again, I think Grant, myself, the entire REC Foundation and VEX Robotics companies know that we need to be flexible this year. So we do really encourage you to look at some of the programs that we're offering. We've doubled the amount of online challenges. We've offered other resources. And now, of course, with remote skills and the remote competition, we think we've provided a lot of options. But at the end of the day, for those teams that received an REC Foundation grant through one of our many sponsors, from Northrop Grumman Foundation, from VEX, from NASA or Dell, we know that this is a trying season, and we are not going to come and take your kit away. We are absolutely going to work with you so that you can compete in 2021, 2022. So, okay. Grant has an answer for the VEX U. So.
Yeah, sorry. So thank you so much, Jim. Like I said, somebody needs to pop in my phone and give me the answer. So yeah, for the VEX U skills scores, basically it's the same as last year. They can still do so. You can still submit at a high school remote skills only competition, and the EP will then submit your score to their regional support manager. So you no longer have the requirement to volunteer, I don't think, because there's less volunteers needed for remote skills only. But the mechanism is still going to be there. Yeah.
Here's another question I'm happy to answer. Why should teams register their teams and buy equipment if there's a limited in-person events? And honestly, that's the whole premise of this town hall is, of course, we do understand there are going to be limited in-person events in some parts of the world and in some parts of the United States. But surprisingly, we're finding our event partners are finding ways to have in-person events, and they're working with their communities, and they're changing the rules a little bit. But but what we're trying to say is that, okay, an in-person event isn't available for you right now, but maybe it will be in December or January, but you still can build a robot. You can still start with the design process, understand the games, build your robot, and you can participate in a remote skills event, and you can participate now in one of these live remote head-to-head events. So we think we're providing you some really, really good options to still have a season this year. So so I ask you really to consider. I agree. The live experience is what it's all about, right? With the crowds and stuff like that. That's a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, what we get from our program is the technical skills you get from building and designing a robot, and the soft skills you get from communicating with your teammates, writing into the journals, so many of the other things, and that you can still experience even if you don't go to a live event. So another question for Grant: will Cortex still be allowed this season with remote events?
Probably.
Okay.
If there are no follow-up questions.
Here's a good one. I like this one. Our signature events still scheduled for this season, and they suggest that there be a live remote competition. First of all, some of our signature events, which was a brainchild a couple years ago, that's really taken off. Many of our event partners for signature events are working feverishly to still have their signature events this year. I do want to say that they've reached out to me personally. And they're committed as their communities open up to have signature events. But I do think by the nature of what live remote offers is you can create an event. If you get an event partner that creates an event, you can create your own signature event, right? By the nature of what this allows you to do is we can open it up across the state, across the country, across the world, and have signature events with the live remote. So I think you'll definitely see both the standard signature event as well as live remote special events. Grant, can I get a refund on season competition materials I purchased if there are no competitions in my area?
Contact support@vex.com with your order number and the details of the scenario, and we'll see what we can do. It has to do with a number of factors, like if they've been opened, how much use they've had, how long ago the purchase was. So I can't provide a blanket answer, but we'd be happy to look into it for you, for sure.
Here's one. Will there be a lobby where teams can practice with another team at any time? This is, I think, specifically for the live remote events, and the answer for that is yes. So a lot of information to come your way October 1st, but I do think that is something we've definitely built into the technology. Can we get an update on the student advisory board selection process? So someone's paying attention. That's really good. So a year ago, when we opened up the student advisory board, it was a little over a year ago, we had over 90 applicants for 8 spots. And a few of the students have elected to move on, but we have kept a good core of the student advisory board from this past season, but we realized we wanted even more input, more geographic and program representation. So we had opened it up about 3 weeks ago, and the applications are way lagging from last year. So we have expanded the application date till the end of September. So for many of those that maybe because you're not back in school or whatever, if you're an event partner or a coach and you have students that would be please encourage them to apply. Again, everybody wonders what the student advisory board does, and basically they give the student perspective of what we're doing right, and more importantly, what we're doing wrong with our program. So excited. The first year was a success. I expect even better things in year 2. Another question, due to the financial status, how does the RACF plan to keep their programs affordable? That's I'll answer from my perspective, and I think I'll let Grant answer from his perspective too. So I feel like a salesperson sometimes that, our sponsors have been wonderful. Our sponsors that sponsored the REC Founded last year have all come back. They're all continuing to sponsor. They believe in what we're doing. So that's number one thing, is I want to thank them. We did not increase the registration fees, right? When I became CEO, I announced to everybody that we would have a registration fee freeze. Actually that first month we had to increase our registration fees, but then we said we'd freeze for 3 years. So everybody was expecting an increase in registration fees this year, and we obviously didn't do that. So we froze the registration fees. We're offering low-cost options now, like remote skills only events, and now this event. And we also still have grants. I think it's important that the community knows that the REC Foundation is still offering team grants, matching grants, and girl-powered grants. So that's still resources available for your teams. We want to work with you. Remember, the best resource out there for anybody out there is your regional support manager. So if you have these questions, please contact your regional support manager. So from the REC Foundation, again, great sponsorship that's allowing us to support these programs, freeze on registration fees, lower cost events. From the VEX side, anything you want to add, Grant?
That's a hot question. It's an interestingly phrased question as well. I think if I'm interpreting the question right, it sounds like the person is thankful that we have been able to keep things affordable thus far, and so I appreciate your kind of clarity on that. But no, it's been an interesting time for VEX here this year, and it's been an interesting time for the REC. I mean, the education industry as a whole, and we could do a whole webinar on this, in its own right, right? But we've been VEX as a company, IFI as a company is making it through, just fine. We have been in kind of a man, this is where like I don't know how deep into the answer I want to get here, but like VEX is very fortunate to be part of a family of companies here at Innovation First International that's diversified across like retail toys, server racks, vending machines. I mean, all sorts of fun stuff. And so over the years, over the 10, 15 years, how that the company's been around, it's allowed each of the three companies to weather various downturns or product issues or sales issues or what have you. And so COVID has been a particularly challenging year for all three companies, but we're continuing to support each other and work together. And yeah, we're showing no signs of like drastic price increases to try and stay alive or anything like that, which I think echoes what Dan was saying about the REC.
Yeah. Here's a question. This is a good one. Will RAD, again, that's the REC Foundation aerial drones, be supported for remote live events? So right now, what we have is we have our in-person event like last year, which is multiple students per team. One of the things that was really unique is we're allowing a one student versus the field, right? So that completely supports social distancing, but you still need to have the field set up. And RAD fields are larger than a VEX field, right? So it's not the kind of thing that you're going to set up in your garage or someplace like that. And that's why we announced earlier today the virtual RAD program too. So it is a different challenge than the RAD competition, the partnership with For the Win and the REC Foundation. That is a different game this year, although we hope in the future we can all kind of be similar. But the virtual RAD game with Robotify is challenging and it's fun, and that will allow students to do that. And I really hope that people will consider the bundle where they'll start with virtual RAD and then continue into the RAD competition model this year. Grant, can you touch multiple goals and accounts for the end game?
Good question. Yeah, those those types of nuances we'll take to the forum thread or the Q&As or what have you.
Yeah. Here's a question I really like, and it's actually for you, but I'm also going to answer.
Sure.
So how will we keep the integrity of the competition with remote live events, teams cheating with inspection and other things?
You want me to take it first?
Yeah.
All right. Don't cheat. No, it's. I mean, that has been a #1 question for a lot of us internally, the GDC, the head referees. Yeah. I mean, obviously that's a crucial question. And so the game does. Some of the rules modifications are designed to kind of limit the number of difficult judgment calls that a referee is going to have to make. Again, that's one of the main reasons why we're taking away possession limits for remote, because seems like a silly thing for a ref to try and judge based on webcam. But to somebody who's heard that we're going to be doing webcam based competitions and you immediately started thinking, oh well, I could just hook this thing up and create a denial of service attack on my opponent or whatever. Like, yeah, you could also show up with modified motors. You could also have an adult driving in the driver's station. You could also, you can cheat, but the integrity of our competition is upheld by its competitors and its coaches, and it's the heart of it all that you don't, which is a very kind of weird way to phrase it, but that's really what it comes down to. One of the other ways I answer, sometimes this is definitely turning into this episode of Grant Rants. No, but it's like, yeah, somebody who was going to cheat is still going to cheat. Somebody who probably wasn't going to cheat probably won't cheat. And that's one of the reasons why we kind of love what our program has been able to grow into over the past decade, is that it is a program where the cheaters are punished when we find them, and a lot of times it's self-regulated amongst yourselves. And I hope that remote gameplay is approached the same way.
Yeah.
I decided to take that approach. I think I know how you're going to answer.
No, I was going to answer. So this isn't fair. I was going to answer how Grant answered, and I thought he was going to give the technical answer, which is that they had a demo that actually began. This is still a V5 for most robots. It'll be a V5 brain and stuff, and as it's connected, all the different connections across the globe, we'll actually be able to plug in your robot and do some system checks with V5 too. I thought that would be
Oh
the answer.
yeah, there's that. Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that too. It'll also self-inspect to make sure you have the right number of motors connected and all that fun stuff too. But I care more about so one last little last asterisk on the Grant rant, which is, you know, there are some years where an immense amount of effort and resources and manpower and legalese are devoted towards making sure that gameplay is fair, making sure that cheaters are caught, right? Modified motors, for those of you who were around that year, right? That was an immense undertaking. Programming interviews at Worlds. I think most people know that we do that now, so I can say that. You know, like these things take immense amount of resources. This year, those resources are going into making sure that teams who want to compete, teams who have the ability to compete or want to, you know, build a robot, have the ability to do so and have accessible ways to do so. And that's what's more important to us this year than making sure that you're not touching the goal when you're not supposed to be. That's my other half of the answer.
And I think Grant explained it really, really well, but I feel like I need to weigh on this one too, because I have an old story and a new story. So even though I was thinner and had darker hair and more hair 3 years ago, I've only been with the REC Foundation a little over 3 years ago. And but one of the things that I brought that I really wanted to implement was the code of conduct. And there was a lot of naysayers out there saying that the code of conduct wouldn't work in the REC Foundation. And I'll never forget, it was an event partner in California says, well, you don't know until you try. And so we had some growing pains the first year with the code of conduct, but last year, the code of conduct was really, really good. And then we added student-centered, and student-centered has been a very popular addition to it. And the fact of the matter is almost everybody out there isn't cheating. And I got a call Sunday night, and it was like after 9 o'clock when I should have been watching the Cowboys playing football. And they said, we need to trust the community this year. You know, we can't spend all our trying to zoom in cameras and do all this stuff. We're going to need to trust the community to score properly. And my goodness, that's really resonated with me. And I've told my staff we have to kind of go in with that mindset this year. So that's a really good question. And I think this is the year of trust, right? So our program is not about winning trophies and blue banners. It's about the design process and engineering and doing soft skills.
Yeah.
So
let's have some fun, play some robots.
Exactly.
Right?
Let's play some robots.
That's more what it's
My goodness,
about.
we've all been cooped up, right? So, and I want to go back to the beach and, you know, go do some fun again. So at least let's have some fun playing some robots. So I want to answer one quick more question. Will there be girl-powered events this year? It's an easy one because we've already sent out the communication that we will be having girl-powered events. The first 100 and some event partners that register still get the girl-powered boxes. So so please go to our website if you need more information on that. But absolutely, and the girl-powered events can be in person or virtual. We're supporting both. Grant, thanks for being on again. I think these town halls are really popular from what I'm seeing. I mean, I can't believe the number of questions. I think we only probably answered maybe 20, 30% of them. So, but a lot's coming. Remember, the next big release is going to be October 1st, where we'll have the GDC game manual updates. We'll have documentation for event partners, documentation for teams and coaches, and documentation for the regional support managers that work so hard for this program. And then we expect to start having events on November 1st. And I encourage you to be part of something that's new and unique. I mean, the world's first remote live competition. So I know I'm supposed to give some closing remarks, but could I get the slide up there, please? Because what I really want from the community, from the event partners that are watching, from the coaches that are watching, and even students that may have watched today, is we've announced this to our staff, and they have a lot of questions and they want to know the best way to support you. So what we want you to do is contact us, right? So I'm actually going to put a post on VEX forum, give us your feedback, and we're also going to put posts on the Facebook coaches pages, and we're looking for your feedback there. But also, please contact the REC Foundation. So you can always send it to support@roboticseducation.org. I think that's a great way to do it. If you know, your RSM is generally your direct contact, but we're asking the RSMs to also forward the feedback to us too. So although we've come a long way in 5 short weeks, we want to make sure we get this right. So we are looking for your feedback. every time we've given an update to our staff, I ask them, thumbs up or thumbs down. So even some feedback like this, that you think we're on the right path and you're excited about our decision, or if you think we missed the mark too, I'd like to hear that. So again, it's been a fantastic journey. None of us anticipated what happened this year. And I like the resilience of our community. I think it's really, really important. I love our partners. What VEX Robotics, the technology, the resources they provided to help us pull this off is amazing. And I like the fact that even since I've been sitting in this chair, that we've had event partners and coaches reaching out and say, hey, they're grateful and they want to be part of it. So in summary, we're here to support you. This program exists for you, not for us. And I ask everybody to be safe. And we will see you at an event sometime in 2020. So thank you, everybody, and good night.